Hello and welcome aboard the Gallant Says podcast, available live on YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, Facebook, and on X. It is Tuesday, October 29th, 2024, and the Houston Texans got some bad news with a short week. Thursday night football game against the New York Jets on Thursday. We found out that Stefon Diggs tore his ACL in Sunday's game against the Indianapolis Colts. He's going to miss the rest of the year. Let's talk about it.
A radio show host in Seattle called Paul Gallant.
You are definitely living in the hindsight world today, Paul.
Do you feel there's been a consistent theme with the interceptions?
I think every interception really has a different story.
I was just kind of curious what Paul gets to say.
Grow up, mother. Are you kidding me?
Paul Gallant, what the hell is wrong with you?
The news sucks. What more can you say? We talked about it when we found out what it was officially earlier today on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5. Joe, George, and I did. Gallant and George, which you can hear noon to 3, 97.5, 92.5 on the air, and on top of that on YouTube at ESPN Houston. And I threw this question out there, and it does sound a little bit clickbaity, but I think it's just a difficult question to answer. Was the Stefon Diggs trade a failure? And I think you have to say yes, even if you liked the trade, because you traded for a 1-year rental to take your offense to the next level and give yourself insurance in case of another injury to Nico Collins, who is hurt right now, or Tank Dell. And you got some bad luck. I saw Greg Rajan from the Houston Chronicle quote tweet one of my little clips from the radio show today saying, well, it's not a failure. The Texans went all in and the deal just didn't work out. And in response to that, I just say, well, what if you have a good hand and you're playing blackjack or poker and you go all in and you don't win? You still fail, right? It's not a failure we want to give out, but these trades should be graded as successes and failures. The Texans got aggressive with this one. They traded a second-round pick for a wide receiver who hadn't done a whole lot for the Buffalo Bills at the end of last year. The Bills really got going down the stretch when they started handing the football off to James Cook, when they changed their offense up. And they definitely missed Stefon Diggs in the first half of this season. That's why they traded for Amari Cooper. But Diggs down the stretch did not look great, and he had that bad drop against the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs. So there was some risk in bringing him in. And plus you had all of the stories about how he wasn't exactly the easiest teammate to work with, both in Minnesota and in Houston. So you trade the second round pick, you change the contract up so that it would just be a 1-year deal. They eliminated the final 3 years of his deal, turning them into void years, and gave him a 1-year, $22.52 million contract. And he gave you 8 games, and he played well over those 8 games. He led the team in receptions with 47 on 64 targets. He had 496 yards. That's second on the team to Nico Collins, who was leading the league in receiving before he got hurt, on a touchdown reception, no less. He was averaging 10.6 yards a reception, and he had 31 first downs on the year. He played well, but why is he here? He's here to take the offense to the next level. The offense didn't get to the next level. Is that his fault? It's not. But again, that's why you brought him in. You're trying to raise what you could conceptually be offensively. It didn't happen. You brought him in because you're hoping come playoff time, he is going to give you an impossible array of weapons to work with when you're going up against Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, among others in the AFC. And yeah, man, I just got to look at it the way that it is. They did not get better on offense. They're not going to have him in the playoffs, and they're not going to have him during a time where Nico Collins is out. And look, you can make all sorts of excuses here, and I'm not even going to get mad at you. I don't think anyone's in the wrong here. I don't think Nick Caserio needs to be crushed for this. I don't think Stefon Diggs should be crushed either. I feel bad for Stefon Diggs. I think Stefon Diggs did everything the right way. Just take a look at how good of a teammate he's been since he got here. And it's not just everything that was said about him in the offseason. It's also a couple of moments this year where you could tell he clearly took the bad publicity and the, I guess, criticism of him as a teammate to heart. There was that moment against the Minnesota Vikings. He brings the whole team over, and you can read based off his body language that he is in the most polite and non-negative way trying to rally the troops. And there was another moment, I forget the game that it was. I think it was at NRG Stadium, where in the midst of a bunch of false starts, I'm going to guess it was against the Jacksonville Jaguars, as everyone was coming off the field, he gave everybody a handshake. And it felt like one of encouragement. And this was right after the offensive line did a bunch of false starts or legal formations in a row. So he's done everything right. And he played pretty well. Wasn't great, but he was very good, right? And it felt like in that last game in particular, he was finally developing the same kind of Vulcan mind meld that he had with, that CJ Stroud has with Nico Collins. Xavier Hutchinson has that catch over the middle. The Texans run up to the line of scrimmage. They call a very next play. You see Stefon Diggs running out and up. Diggs catches it, 49-yard reception, and with 2 minutes left in the third quarter, Diggs had 5 catches for 81 yards. It's looking like this is going to be the first day where he really blows up. And then that happens on a throw that was a check down. And really, he was playing well in this game. I saw this tweet from Texans Cap earlier today, and if you are watching along with us, some people are listening to this in podcast form, you can actually see this on YouTube at Paul Gallant, on Twitch at Gallant Says, Facebook.com/Paul Gallant Sports, on Instagram at Sports Gallant, and on Twitter at Gallant Says. Here is a moment where Stefon Diggs was open and CJ Stroud just didn't get him the football. This is from the all-22 look. Stroud's rolling out to his right. You can see at the bottom of the screen right there, Diggs was open, but Stroud checked it down. I'm sure Diggs was frustrated not getting the football there. But hey, shit happens, right? And maybe this is a byproduct of all the pressure that Stroud's been facing, where he didn't want to look at the pressure. He thought he might be under pressure, even on a bootleg, and he felt like he needed to get the ball out as quickly as possible. Gives it to him on that play, and you wonder, butterfly effect, what happens differently? Say Stroud throws him the ball there, blah, blah, blah. But unfortunately, doesn't matter anymore. He's out for the year. And it's the rare lose-lose trade where two sides bet on themselves, and due to flukish bad luck, both lose. Stefon Diggs is 31 years old in a month. He's going to be a free agent after the year after tearing his ACL. He wanted the Texans to get rid of the last couple of years of his contract, so if he played well this year with CJ Stroud, he'd be able to get a new deal somewhere else. Meanwhile, the Texans traded a second-round pick for him, and I know it's a 2025 second-round pick. I think it's the Vikings pick specifically. It's going to likely be a late second-round pick. But you gave it up for a rental. Is what you got from Stefon Diggs in 8 games probably more than whatever you would have gotten out of that second-round pick? Probably, but hey, you win the draft based off of what you do in the second, third, and fourth round. You got to find good players. And you only got 8 games out of Stefon Diggs. None of them were playoff games. It's just shit luck. But shit luck it can cause failure. I think the biggest failure of all here is that it created such outsized expectations for the Houston Texans offense that they couldn't possibly live up to. I don't know how many think pieces I saw this offseason talking about how the Texans might have 3 1,000-yard receivers this year, which is, to be frank, crazy. 3 1,000-yard receivers. That was never going to happen. But a lot of us sipped the Kool-Aid. We were excited, and in an offseason where the Texans added Diggs and added Danielle Hunter, had C.J. Stroud going into his second year, having played so well in his rookie year, one of the best rookie seasons we've ever seen from a quarterback with DeMeco Ryans. I think it just created a perfect storm where we were telling ourselves offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick is going to have a new deal as a head coach with another team at the end of the year. Also crazy. We said a lot of crazy things this offseason instead of focusing on some of the things that were real questions. Can this team effectively run the football? Well, they can if they have someone like Joe Mixon under center behind C.J. Stroud. Not under center. Also, is this offensive line going to be good in pass protection? It looked pretty shaky the first couple of weeks of 2023, but Stroud got better, and he kept on figuring out ways to extend plays, get out of the pocket, throw the ball to Nico Collins downfield, and he made it work week in, week out. But now we're at a point where you got to wonder just how effective is this Texans offense going to be going forward without Stefon Diggs. And I think we all thought to this point we would have seen more than what we've seen. But we haven't seen that 400-yard, 4-touchdown performance that I think everyone thought was going to happen a lot. And, yeah, it sucks. He did everything right. He performed well. But ultimately, it did not check the 2 boxes of things that you wanted to see happen. And my big question is now, what happens next? Are the Texans likely to give Stefon Diggs the kind of deal he'll be looking for at age 31, especially coming off of a torn ACL? Perhaps the last big contract he'll ever get. I'm skeptical they will. They haven't really given anybody contract extensions worth writing home about, right? Nico Collins was a 3-year deal, $72 million. Laramie Tunsil, 3-year deal. They don't typically give the long-term deals out. So since they don't give out the long-term deals, are they going to give it to a guy who's 31 coming off of a torn ACL? Probably not. So I'm bummed out. I feel bad for Nick Caserio because it's not his fault that it worked out like this. But the trade's a failure if you're trading a second-round pick for a guy who only played the first 8 games of a season. Not even half a season, technically, because now it's a 17-game slate. And I feel bad for Stefon Diggs because that contract that he was playing under, I think I'd want to stay under it now too. The real hope is for those who want to see Stefon Diggs back next year. And look, I'm not opposed to it, but there's certainly a price where I think the Texans have to be willing to walk away. You got to wonder if playing with C.J. Stroud, playing for DeMeco Ryans is the most fun that Stefon Diggs has ever had. And maybe he comes back for a discount or something like that. Another 1-year prove-it kind of deal. But if I'm 31, I'm going to be looking for somebody to give me more than that. And there will likely be teams willing to pay more who are in more desperate situations. Say you're the Carolina Panthers and you got no weapons for Bryce Young to throw to. Aren't you going to think about a deal like this, especially if you're a reactive owner like David Tepper is? I think they will for sure. So lots of things to be frustrated about today. I do think the Stefon Diggs trade is a failure by default just because it did not do the 2 things it was supposed to do. But I'm not mad about it to the point of I'm saying, Nick Caserio needs to be fired. Stefon Diggs sucked. No, neither of those things were true. But the trade is by default a failure. And again, I don't know how many times I can say it. It just sucks. That's really all you can say. All right, let's read some comments here on YouTube at Paul Gallant, on Twitch at Gallant Says, Facebook.com/Paul Gallant Sports, on Instagram at Sports Gallant. Dominic Pizzanelli says, Gallant, I'm going to come into the studio next Thursday. How are you going to do that? Did you get Did you get the access codes or something like that? We would like to see you. Dominic called into the radio show this week. On Twitch, Hugh Dab says, I look better in this lighting. Well, there's been a moment in time where I didn't look good. I'm assuming it's bringing out the white in my beard a little bit more. Dab also says, Diggs is out. I think Prize Picks has Mixon rushing at 60 yards on Thursday. I would take the over on that. The Jets have struggled to stop the run, and if I'm the Texans without Stefon Diggs, I'm going to run as much as I can. I think the real question is, do the Jets look at the Texans without Stefon Diggs and without Nico Collins, show no respect to Tank Dell, and just load the box and say, all right, beat us. Whatever they threw against C.J. Stroud the last time around in East Rutherford with Zach Wilson under center, it clearly worked. They even concussed Stroud in that game. Dunny comments on YouTube at Paul Gallant, who should see more targets, Hutch or Woods? Hutch or Woods? I feel like Hutchinson has shown glimpses of extreme athleticism, but look at it from this perspective. Who's been in the league longer? Who would you trust more if you're CJ Stroud? Who would you trust more if you're Bobby Slowick? I think right now they're going to trust Robert Woods a little bit more. So I would assume that Woods for this game on Thursday is the number 2 wide receiver. And that Hutchinson comes in blocking situations like he has before. Hopefully he does better than on that screen pass that we saw on that 3rd and 2 to John Mechie. And maybe Bobby Slowick just stops calling those screen plays altogether. More comments here on YouTube at Paul Gallant. At least we can have Diggs again next year. The play for pay scenario is out the window now. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think if you're Stefon Diggs, you're going to be looking for a multi-year deal. You're 31. This might be the last deal you ever get. That's multiple years. And I do think there will be teams willing to spend big money. Just think about the many dumb teams in the NFL. Want to just list them off the top of your head? The Jets. Would they? The Patriots with Drake May. Would they? They're terrible at wide receiver. How about maybe not the Cleveland Browns? Titans are definitely flushing things down the toilet. Raiders need a quarterback. Would the Chargers look at a Stefon Diggs? Probably not for anything longer, though, than 1 year. The Giants, they need an actual quarterback. Would the Bears? I don't know about that. Panthers definitely would. They're in a kind of messy situation. And maybe the Bucks would too, if depending on what's going on with Mike Evans, and also on top of that, what's going on with Chris Godwin. I think he got hurt and he's out for the year. Is he ever going to play for the Bucks again? I think that was the last year of his contract. So there's certainly teams out there that'll think about that. And I think that Diggs is going to think to himself, yes, someone's going to pay me. Now, after a couple of weeks, maybe things change and he decides he wants to come back. But I think it's rather unlikely that the Texans will be able to bring him back. On Instagram at Sports Gallant, Patrick DeBose comments, Texans are fine there, 6-2 on top of the division. They'll sweep the division. And if I'm the GM, go trade for offensive linemen and try to get Cooper Kupp. Rams aren't going to trade Cooper Kupp. The NFC West is completely up for grabs. And while the Rams are in last place at 3-4, every other team in the NFC West is 4-4. And the Cardinals of all teams are the one that leads the whole thing, despite having a negative point differential of negative 27. So I don't think that the Kupp trade can happen. I would like them to trade for an offensive lineman, though, as I said earlier today on the radio. What else do we have here? We'll talk about Anthony Richardson in a little bit. Hackashack says, I think we can re-sign him at a decent price now. Joe Lee 713. I think we should have just wanted or found someone cheaper. And I think he meant to say waited there. Yeah, this is definitely something that Captain Hindsight helps you out with here, but they could have traded for Amari Cooper. I'm trying to see, what was the price for the Amari Cooper trade? Amari Cooper went to the Bills for a 3rd round pick and a 7th round pick. They also got a 6th round pick in return for those 2 picks. Stefon Diggs for a 2nd, Amari Cooper for a 3rd. But think about it from this perspective. You can make that trade for a 3rd when you're halfway through the year. Can you make that trade for a third during the offseason? And would you have wanted to go into this year with just Nico Collins and Tank Dell? Personally, I would have. I'm of the belief that CJ Stroud is at a level of quarterback where it's his job to raise the level of talent around him, no matter who they are. And I did think that we were getting a little bit too psychotic and fantasy football, fantasy land with what we were asking for this offseason. I think a lot of people were looking at the Texans and saying, well, just get this guy, get that guy. And sort of to what Patrick was saying earlier, Cooper Kupp is the same kind of logic where you're making moves happen in Madden where the computer's trade settings have been turned off. Hack-a-Shack comments, will be lucky to have one 1,000-yard receiver with this O-line. Honestly, Nico Collins could get to 1,000 yards in 3 games when he comes back. Will he be the same player coming back from the hamstring injury? Will he re-aggravate it again? Who knows? Great questions that I ask to myself, making them the greatest questions of all. Tora McJohnson comments, I didn't sip the Kool-Aid. I always tempered my expectations. They have improved on the penalties. I'll admit that as the offseason rolled along, the Kool-Aid actually made me sour on the expectations for the year. I was probably feeling my best about the Texans going into this season in early April, right before the draft. And also probably similarly right after the game against the Ravens, where I felt like they played well in the first half, but they were just outgunned without Tank Dell out there. And I figured, all right, you get Tank Dell back. This offense is going to get back to what it was before. But it's been a rough offseason for Dell, coming back from the injury, coming back from getting shot. So these are things you got to keep in mind. Chad Shipman, 3,000-yard receivers, Collins, Tank, and Mechie. Jesus, stop. The 1,000-yard receivers, having 3 of them, that's just not going to happen. It won't. I could see 2 happening. 3 is an insane amount. That means that you're not running the football at all, basically, if you have 3 that are getting it at a level like that. And the Texans signed Joe Mixon this offseason to a 3-year extension after trading for him. You knew they were going to run the ball. They ran the football a ton last year when they didn't even have a good running back. I like Dameon Pierce's talent, but he doesn't fit with this system, or at least the Texans seem to feel that way, seeing as they never give him the ball. And then on top of that, I mean, you were running it a ton with Devin Singletary, for God's sake. So you bring in Joe Mixon. You were going to give Mixon a lot of touches, and Mixon, to his credit, I mean, he has been the whole Texans offense of late. G comments, it's hard to go over the top when guys get hurt. Talking Mixon, talking Collins. Well, it's also hard to go over the top when your pass protection isn't giving you any fucking help up the middle. We'll see if a change is made on the interior offensive line. I saw some cryptic tweets from Texans reporters that suggest that perhaps there will be some different linemen on Thursday in East Rutherford, New York against the Jets, but we're going to have to wait and see. More comments here. Most of them coming from YouTube, but you can do it on Instagram at Sports Gallant, on X at Gallant Says, Facebook.com/Paul Gallant Sports, and on Twitch at Gallant Says. This one is from Nicholas Melchor. Now it's up to Bobby Slowick to figure out the pieces. Get ready to see more cute plays that don't work. Lord help us. Jesus. So cynical. Capsize says, finally alive where I'm not in bed. What's up, Paul? We're trying to change that, trying to make this happen at 4 or 5 after the show. Ideal time tomorrow, 3:30. Another comment. This is from Chris. I do not believe in Kenyon Green. Yep, there are very few people who believe in Texans left guard Kenyon Green right now. I don't even think Kenyon Green believes in himself. And I feel bad for him that he doesn't believe in himself. Truly, I think he has got a lot of shit. And I don't think that the struggles are for a lack of trying. I will get mad at somebody who's stupid on the field, like Tyreek Stevenson, that dipshit who poked Nico Collins in the Sunday Night Football game. And I feel very comfortable calling him that, even if he's apologizing after the game, because he was getting into it with Terry McLaurin too. The guy just doesn't shut up. He's drawn with Commanders fans right before that Hail Mary. Someone like that, if they struggle and they fail, it is very easy to crush them. Or a Jamarcus Russell or a Johnny Manziel, someone who just didn't give a shit that they had this opportunity to play a game that we all love so much for a living, for millions of dollars. Kenyon Green's, I think, trying his best, and I for whatever reason, he's just having a difficult time picking up these stunts. But everyone knows it, and if they keep on going out there acting like things aren't going to change, I think that they're going to be in for some more bad results. Talked about this on the radio show today, and I'll have a segment posting of it on the YouTube channel for tomorrow. I feel like what D'Amico Ryans was at yesterday's press conference, incredibly positive and optimistic. It's something that I don't think I can honestly say makes me wonder about what he is behind closed doors. It's not something that makes me skeptical that he's ever hard on his players, but when asked about things the offense can improve on, he talked about all the things the offense did that were good. When asked about Kenyon Green's struggles in the offensive line, struggles in pass protection, he talked about things that they've done good. He is so obsessed with positivity that I wonder if he ever brings up things that need to change and get better with his players, how he does it, how he broaches the subject if a guy is underperforming. Because obviously a player is going to know when they're underperforming, but if a guy continues to play when he's underperforming, what does the team think about what's going on there? More comments here on Facebook. Stefon Diggs is still on a winning team. Go H-Town. It would be nice to see Stefon Diggs on a winning team next year. Tradon Allgood says Diggs was 7th in the league in receptions as a wide receiver 2. Fuck off with this wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 stuff. I really hate it. You have multiple wide receivers on the field. Any of them can be the primary target on a given play. It really depends on the coverage that the Texans are going up against, the team is going up against. This wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 stuff made its way into football vernacular over the last couple of years due to all the fucking dorks who are obsessed with fantasy football. No one actually said that. I guess they say it now, but is he wide receiver 1? Is he wide receiver 2? Doesn't fucking matter. Get open and get the ball. This obsession that we have with guys getting statistics drives me fucking crazy. It really does. And it is fantasy football related. I don't give a shit if a guy has 3 catches for 60 yards or 1 catch for 1 yard if the team wins the game and the guy did his job over the course of the game. Even if he doesn't get receptions. It's so weird that we have this as part of the lexicon. Who's wide receiver 1? Who's wide receiver 2? Shut the fuck up. I hate it. I hate it. Sorry that I took this out on you, Tradon Allgood, but I fucking hate that we do this now. It doesn't matter. I want to win as many games as possible. And yeah, we do want some style points. We do want the offense to be playing at a higher level because it does feel like the offensive line issues that we have seen of late are going to kill the Texans eventually. But you don't need to have gaudy statistics to win a Super Bowl. You don't. I grew up watching the Patriots. I saw them win 6. And they did not care what their stats were at the end of the game. Tom Brady throws for less than 200 yards passing. Not the end of the world. And this wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 shit, fuck off. I hate it. It lends itself to not thinking about the team, to thinking about the individual. And there's way too much of that shit in football. That's for fucking basketball. Do it in that soft-ass sport with all those floppers. God. It really does annoy me. Stats are for losers. The final score is for winners. End rant. More comments here. Tradon Allgood. Did Christian Harris get kidnapped because the Diggs injury was transparent? No, he suffered that calf injury in training camp, and he aggravated it in training camp. I was at the practice where he aggravated it, and yeah, it is a little concerning. We are nearly halfway through the year, and we have not seen him back out there yet. Now, for what it's worth, the Texans have not really missed him. Azeez Al-Shaair has been great. Henry To'oTo'o has been great. Devin White, who I wasn't the biggest fan of the signing of because of his past in other spots where he hasn't really been the best teammate. You know what? Everything to this point seems pretty good. We'll see on a short week if he can help this team out. It looks like Henry To'oTo'o might be back. White almost had a sack, kind of had a sack with Tim Settle on Sunday against Anthony Richardson, so for what it's worth, Christian Harris, his absence actually hasn't hurt the Texans in any way, because the Texans defense has been great. There's another post that I had on my YouTube talking about just how good this defense has been. The defense has carried the team this year. They're doing things defensively that are holding multiple quarterbacks, even if Anthony Richardson's one of them. Josh Allen's the other. They're throwing for 30% passing. That hasn't happened twice in the same year, caused by the same defense in over a decade. I think I saw some tweet from Mark Vandermeer, the voice of the Houston Texans, posted, and I gotta say, it was pretty impressive to see how they've been able to keep a couple of these offenses in such dire straits. And sure, there's a lot of throws that have been just off over the course of the year, where if it's in a slightly better place from Anthony Richardson week 1, from Trevor Lawrence, we might be talking about some Texans losses. But the pass rush, I think, is part of these throws not being perfectly accurate when thrown downfield. And Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter finally coming on. Danico Autry, we want to see more from him. He's still ramping up into speed. Mario Edwards, when he wasn't suspended. Tim Settle. They've gotten a lot out of the defensive line, the front seven, and it's why they are 6-2 right now. Joe Mixon and the pass rush are why the Texans are winning, which is something that's pretty awesome to think about when you consider that the passing game still has yet to look its best. But you do have to wonder now if it's ever going to look its best with Stefon Diggs obviously now out for the year. Hack-a-Shack. Paul, do you have the tools to research and give us stats on Texans pitch and toss plays? We have to be averaging negative yards per attempt. Well, that toss to Joe Mixon certainly didn't fucking help. It was a Rosencopter reenactment attempt. It felt like there. I actually wonder about that, because some of the pitches that the Texans have, they'll do these toss sweeps, but the toss sweep is almost directly back to a running back where they're not necessarily going anywhere. It would be helpful if somebody could do that for me. Sadly, I am way too lazy to go up on these websites and try to look up all those stats and see, like, hey, what are the Texans where they toss the ball and try to go to the outside. More comments here. Slowick continues to call 2-3 game. Tora McJohnson says Texans win the Super Bowl this season. Damn, dog. Our hope for 1,000-yard receivers in a season is ruined. Yes, it is. It is. It was very doable, says Brandon Lamb. They just needed 100 targets each. Michael Stover says they are just lucky that they played Anthony Richardson into games. Yes, they are. So let's talk about that. Anthony Richardson. Look, man, as somebody who is a Florida Gator fan, even though I went to Syracuse, never really good at football. Florida, good at football, and I always liked their colors growing up in Boston. I don't know why, but I have. And then I lived in Florida, and I thought about going to the University of Florida until I was a senior in college. I didn't like the campus. I thought the campus was too spread out. Syracuse's campus is very centralized. I didn't really think about the whole snow thing, whatever. That's neither here nor there. I want Anthony Richardson to have the best possible career he can. Maybe not with the Indianapolis Colts, because I've hated the Colts for much of my life, going all the way back to the days of Peyton Manning. They were my favorite team's arch rival growing up, and I know for a lot of people in Houston, they were the boogeyman, constantly sweeping the Texans. It was Peyton Manning, it was T.Y. Hilton. Of late, it was Jonathan Taylor. But I actually do want to see Richardson succeed. Hate me all you want for that, but I do want to see him succeed as a guy who went to Florida. But fuck, man. I mean, he was 2 for 15 in the first half. He did have a 69-yard touchdown pass after the Texans lost Josh down on what seemed to be a little bit of a pick play downfield. And he also had one of the worst interceptions we've ever seen, going 2 for 15. That bad interception set the Colts up for a touchdown. And you really got to wonder, in game number 2, how the Colts were best served leaving Richardson in as long as they did in a game where he once again was sub 50% in completion percentage. 10 of 32 on the game, a 5.5 yards per attempt average. Yes, he had a 69-yard touchdown pass, but he also was sacked 5 times. He was erratic. He was all over the place, and Joe Flacco would have given them a better chance to win the game. I don't know if he would have given them a better chance to win the game in week 1. I thought, honestly, he played pretty well in week 1. But in this past game, they should have pulled him for Joe Flacco. Because they are a team that is right now 4-4. Had they won on Sunday, they would be tied with the Texans for the division lead, at least in terms of overall record, at 5-3 with the season series split. They should have turned to Joe Flacco. But I'm seeing these tweets online, and they're driving me crazy because it's a reflection of the invasion of nerds into coverage of the NFL. Young people seem to be of the belief that the entire point of an NFL season, if you're not a Super Bowl contender, is not to develop a winning culture or just to win and put out a competitive product. It's to make sure the young quarterback thrives at the expense of everything else in the organization. I saw a tweet from this person at YZR_fantasy. And fuck, man, this one triggered me, much like the person who said wide receiver 2. And I can't believe this person's got 8.2 thousand likes on this tweet. The Anthony Richardson benching is laughably bad. You knew that he was a project, and you're giving up 10 games in. Pause. He was 2 for fucking 15 in the game, big boy. And you're not giving up on a quarterback by putting him on the bench. He's under contract for 2025. He's under contract for 2026. And if they pick up his 5th-year option, he'll be under contract for 2027. And he can figure it out. Is he so soft emotionally and in terms of his mental state that if you put him on the bench, he's never going to recover? Like, what a insulting thing to say about some of the most competitive people in all of sports. And sure, maybe Anthony Richardson, you got to wonder about his compete level when he's checking himself out after being gassed on a play. And he even admits that after the game. But this is not giving up on him, benching Anthony Richardson, which the Colts did today for Joe Flacco. Let's read more of this. He isn't a lock to be Josh Allen, obviously, but imagine if the Bills benched Allen after 10 games. Turning a hypothetical, say, 30% chance of a franchise quarterback into a 0% chance is nowhere close to a good move. What the fuck is he, the fairy godmother? Is he somehow turning him into a pumpkin merely by taking him out after he was, what, 0 for fucking 15? My bad. 2 for fucking 15? Where do you get this fucking percentages from? 30% to 0%? What are you fucking talking about? You're just throwing shit out there because in your mind, putting this guy on the bench means he is never going to succeed in the NFL. As if every single situation in the NFL involving a young quarterback is the same. As if Bryce Young's situation is the same as Anthony Richardson's situation. Guys, the Colts made the fucking playoffs last year if they beat the Texans. They would have made the playoffs if they beat the Texans in that last game of the year, despite Gardner Minshew, who was terrible. Joe Flacco, better than Gardner Minshew. Joe Flacco made the playoffs with the Browns last year. You got a second-year head coach. You want to keep playing the guy that's holding everybody back, that's making all the wide receivers around him fucking throwing their hands up in the air and getting pissed off and annoyed that no one's throwing them the ball? Do you want that? Why would you want that? How could anyone want that on that team? If you're his offensive lineman, if you're on the defense, if you're on the offense, how can you co-sign that guy gets to continue playing while you're busting your ass, trying to win and make the playoffs and see what happens in the playoffs? Crazy things have happened. Eli Manning has 2 fucking Super Bowls, for God's sakes. He won them over Tom Brady. I'm not saying that, hey, if The Colts make the playoffs. They're a Super Bowl contender. But people like this, these little children that are all of a sudden talking heads covering the NFL that act like if you don't win the Super Bowl, the season is pointless. These people enable loser culture to take root in an organization a la the Philadelphia 76ers of the trust the process era. And it's fucking annoying. It really is. It's so disrespectful to the 52 players that are on the roster that aren't quarterback. I haven't even finished reading this goddamn tweet. Let's go back to it. This isn't Trey Lance, where you have a cheap 7th rounder who played well. This is 39-year-old Joe Flacco, and this team cannot contend. Again, they were a drop pass away from beating the Houston Texans in that last game of the year on Saturday. They were, a couple of drop passes away from potentially beating the Houston Texans on Sunday, right? I mean, was it not, once again, Goodson dropping a touchdown pass down the left sideline? And I'm sure some people are going to look at the drops and say, hey, this is one of the reasons that Richardson struggled to the way that he did. But no, if you're a team that has a winning record and your rookie quarterback is holding you back, you got to bench him. It does not end his career. And why would it hurt for the guy to sit behind the scenes? Look at where Jordan Love is right now after sitting behind the scenes for a couple of years. I don't think this is the way that every team should go, having a quarterback sit behind a veteran. But it doesn't mean that the guy sucks if he's a backup for a year. I think at this point with Anthony Richardson, with a historically low completion percentage, 44%, 2 for 15 at one point in this game. You're talking about laughably bad at YZR fantasy. Laughably bad is having the worst completion percentage that we've seen in a decade among any quarterback who's thrown enough throws, and it's also being 2 for 15 in a game. It's 2024. I mean, things are as open as ever now because of the 5-yard contact rule being enforced. You should be able to make things happen as a quarterback. And if you can't make it happen at all, sit on the pine. But it's weird that there's just so many people that are covering this game now that think, oh, well, if you don't have a Super Bowl chance, there's no point. No, you can build towards a Super Bowl over years by trying to win football games. Imagine if you're Shane Steichen and ownership is telling you, no, you got to keep rolling with this quarterback. I mean, how is that any different than the Brown situation where they're telling Kevin Stefanski, probably, that you got to keep putting Deshaun Watson in there? I don't get it. And there was another tweet here that I tagged. I think it's from Benjamin Solak. I don't really get Benjamin Solak appeal, whatever. He said essentially the same thing. This was when people were talking about potentially benching Anthony Richardson on Monday and whether or not he'd start Sunday night against the fucking Minnesota Vikings and Brian Flores. Shane Steichen to reporters on whether he'll start Sunday night in Minnesota. We're evaluating everything. This is what Ben Solak wrote. Huh? Even if Richardson were totally awful and the reason they lost on Sunday. Not the case at all, in my opinion. Not the case at all? Not the case at all. He was 2 for fucking 15 and threw a terrible interception in a game that was decided by 3 points. He threw the interception that set the Texans up with their offensive touchdown right before the end of the first half. What are you fucking talking about? You're clearly not watching. Anyway, the tweet continues. What was true of Richardson when you drafted him in 2023 remains true today. He needs reps. Or is he just going to get magically more accurate with more reps when he's 2 for 15 in a game? When he's 44% completion percentage? He was 9-19 the first game of the year where he was hitting those bombs downfield. This is his 10th career start. Would be an indefensibly quick hook. These young people, they act like it's permanence to put a guy on the bench. It's not. I do not get it. Oh. Anyway, Richardson deserves to be benched. He's played poorly, and the Colts teammates there deserve better. This league is not only about quarterbacks. Honestly, I feel like we should get rid of some of these quarterback-friendly rules and make it so that everybody is on a level playing field. Alas, we cannot. We have these rules to protect quarterbacks when they get hurt. We allow quarterbacks to tiptoe down the sideline, and if you even give them a shove too hard, you're going to get a 15-yard fucking penalty for it. I'm tired of it. I'm just tired of it. At a certain point, we got to be honest here and take a look at the game and wonder whether or not a team game like football is truly a team game anymore if all that matters is catering to the whims of your young quarterback. And honestly, when I see these young people that are saying, oh, you can't bench him, it's only been 10 games, I just wonder how you'll be as a parent. Honestly, you're probably a terrible father already. Like, that's what I think. That's what I think. You're just going to let this person walk all over you and continue to fail and fail and fail and fail without any sort of accountability or repercussions for the actions. I don't get it. I really don't. End rant. I guess Freddie Freeman hit another home run. How about that? That's fun. Let's read some comments here on YouTube at Paul Gallant, on Twitch at Gallant Says, Facebook.com/Paul Gallant Sports, on Twitter at Gallant Says, on Instagram at Sports Gallant. Tormac Johnson says, stuff the stat nerds in a locker. Honestly, I do want to play football against some of these guys, and I'm not even like that good of a flag football player, but I want to play against some of these guys. I really do. I don't know what it would do for me other than just validate that I am more toxically masculine than them. Is that something I want to be? I don't know. Ray Tello asks, is the rumor true we might trade for Garrett Wilson? I haven't seen that rumor yet. Tormac Johnson says, Paul says rebuilding is bad because he's only bandwagon championship teams. First off, fuck you. I grew up a Patriots fan. I do bandwagon the Astros, but I mean, I don't really like baseball that much. I barely talked about the Astros from 2011 to 2015. When they got good, hey, I jumped on the bandwagon, and I was dating someone who worked for the organization at the time that they finally got good. However, look, I don't like what they did from 2011 to 2015. And that very rarely works out, where you suck for a really long period of time and you just let the young players play. You got to try to win at some point. You got to bring in some veterans who care about winning at some point. And I feel like this is something that that is just getting overlooked a lot in sports. I felt like the Rockets were doing this, where all the young players, yeah, do whatever. Jalen Green, yeah, just keep shooting up shots. It'll be okay eventually. Kevin Porter Jr., same thing. These rebuilding teams who just allow things to continue to operate in a vacuum, just complete anarchy without any person at the top saying, no, you're not playing well enough. You got to sit on the bench. Do those organizations ever become successful? Do they ever become good? I look at the Philadelphia 76ers. I will never take them seriously. Even if they have a guy in Joel Embiid who's won a couple of MVPs, I will never take them seriously. Ever, 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 ever. And I guess it's just one MVP, to be honest, because I felt like the Sixers just enabled losing habits from that guy. And now this fucker is going into the year saying, hey, I'm not going to play on back-to-back nights. And I've always loved Joel Embiid, but my God, that's so soft. And it feels like it's something that was coddled and enabled by the Sixers culture of, hey, we're fine losing, just make sure that the young players continue to get better at the expense of everything else around it. And in a league where guys have 3-year careers, you're really going to waste their careers saying, look, everything else on this team is good. The offense is pretty good. The defense is pretty good. But you know what? Fuck all of you guys. It's all about Anthony Richardson, who probably isn't the guy. Most young quarterbacks probably aren't the guy. Everyone should be looking at them as probably not the guy. That way, they can break up with them a little bit more easily. You should be a commitment phobe with your young quarterback, unless you do stumble into someone like CJ Stroud, which is such a rarity. And hey, you put the guy in there. If he plays well, you continue to put him in there. If he's not playing well, pull him and tell him, hey, you'll get another chance. But right now, it's just not working out for him. And that's what's happening for Anthony Richardson right now. And I can't believe how many of these young little babies who truly are maybe 20 years old, who clearly seem to have some sort of line of thinking that is entirely forged by fantasy football and analytics and numbers. When a guy sucks, he is letting the rest of his team down. Sit on the fucking bench. And rant. Anyway. What else do we have here? Oh, I did want to touch on this. And hey, guys, this is the Gallant Says podcast, and we're doing it at the very end. I only know who this person is because I own a condo. And since I own a condo, I have to pay taxes, property taxes. I don't like it. And I also don't like that the Harris County judge has once again found a way to do something without a vote, whether it's saving the Astrodome, which everyone voted to get rid of. That's what Judge Ed Emmett did. I called him a boob for doing that. He got it turned into a historical landmark and protected. He actually called into my radio show, and we had a very nice conversation after I called him a boob. But his monomania for the salvation of the Astrodome, located in a rather dumpy part of town that no one's ever going to invest money into, especially considering that venue is overrun by rats, bats, cats. We could only hope. And asbestos. You would think that no one's ever going to turn that thing into the convention center that it actually has received funding to become. So that's frustrating, right? That the property taxes are going to increase. Well, imagine you find out that the person that you are writing these property taxes out to hasn't showed up for work since late 2020. Ann Harris Bennett is the Harris County tax assessor collector. Last year, she announced she would not be seeking a third term, desire to focus on her family and health. But, I mean, she's in charge of election duties. That's a little concerning with the presidential election a week away. Has hardly corresponded via email. Has missed a string of key public appearances. And has not swiped into her office with her badge since October of 2020. And we're talking any county facility. October of 2020. That's 4 years ago. She swiped her badge 92 times in 2019, 7 times in 2020, not once since then. And okay, maybe she's working from home and she's up there in age, blah, 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 blah. But it must be so nice to have a job where you don't ever have to show up for work and you could do it from home for 4 years with seemingly little day-to-day responsibilities. And now I'm wondering, hey, I mean, I write out a check to the tax assessor collector. Can I ask for all of this back? Can I ask for it back? Serious question. And it's interesting. I mean, hey, maybe she is working from home, but it does seem based off of this Houston Chronicle article that she's not. And whatever she's doing from home doesn't seem to be going so well. I don't know how many people saw this article in the Houston Chronicle, but there's literally a section called A Series of Blunders in this Houston Chronicle article. 2018, her office mistakenly suspended over 1,700 voter registrations. That same year, her office failed to update boundary maps in Baytown. There's also been a transfer of Harris County's election duties this year. It used to be divided between the tax assessor collector and county clerk. Now there's an independent elections office. She, Ann Harris Bennett, and former Harris County clerk Diane Troutman objected to the move. They argue checks and balances between her and the clerk's office were crucial for building public trust, but she's not showing up for work. There's another section called Missing in Action. So, look, these are just things that I have noticed, and apolitically, I find to be a little bit concerning. And that does seem to be the norm these days, that you can be elected to political office and just leave. Whether it was Lena Hidalgo with the 2-month leave of absence from work to retrieve treatment for clinical depression back in 2023. I think it was August 7th through October 2nd of last year. Politics aside, if you need to take a leave for mental health reasons, shouldn't you have to step down from office? I get it. Mental health, it's a huge priority, blah, 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 blah. I said all the right things, right? But I don't know, maybe let somebody else do the job. Or if you're not going to show up since 2020, maybe let somebody else do the job. Because maybe if you do the job, you're not going to let Lena Hidalgo go around to vote so that we increase property taxes by 9.53%. And then with a little extra on top of that, nearly 10%. Because I don't know if she actually has the power to stop something like this, but Ann Harris Bennett would have been nice maybe if she showed up for work. Maybe I don't have a 10% property tax increase coming for next year. But hey, I mean, they saved the Astrodome when 53% of voters rejected a plan to save it in 2015. It would have been a $217 million bond proposal that would have paid for renovations. And now, since the site is a state antiquities landmark, there's an $105 million renovation that was okayed in 2018. This was by Ed Emmett, not by Lena Hidalgo, for what it's worth. But have we seen anything done to the Astrodome since that $105 million proposal was greenlit in 2018? It was 6 fucking years ago. No? Oh, okay. Just checking. And on that note, guys, that's going to wrap up today's edition of the Gallant Says podcast. We're going to try to do this tomorrow at 3:30. We'll see if I get as hot and bothered as I did today over all those Anthony Richardson boboing that took place. Anyway, make sure, if you haven't already, that you subscribe to the Gallant Says podcast wherever you get your podcasts. That's Apple Podcasts, that's Spotify, or that you're subscribing to this so you can catch it live wherever you do your social media. On YouTube, it's at Paul Gallant. On Twitch, it's at Gallant Says. On Facebook, it's facebook.com/Paul Gallant Sports. On Instagram, it's at Sports Gallant. And on X, it's at Gallant Says. Please like the video, subscribe. My cat's health depends on it. Anyway, until tomorrow at hopefully 3:30, he said, knowing he probably would not actually get that thing started tomorrow at 3:30. So long, farewell, have yourselves